Some films were harmed in the making of this podcast.
Young people from all over the globe are joining up to fight for the future.
I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part, too.
They're doing their part. Are you? Join the mobile infantry and save the world. Service guarantees citizenship.
Hello and welcome to another episode of For Your Consideration, the podcast featuring roundtable discussion reevaluating the cinematic canon of past masterpieces and modern classics. I'm your host, Dustin.
And I'm Mike.
Thanks for joining us.
Alright, you apes. Welcome back to another episode of the show. Since November 7th marks the 20th anniversary of Starship Troopers being released in theaters, we decided... Oh, and since Starship Troopers is actually on the Sight and Sound list, which I thought was pretty fantastic, we thought we would kind of do an anniversary celebration of Starship Troopers, covering all the films this month, and we're starting it, of course, with the original Paul Verhoeven film, Starship Troopers.
AKA StarCraft, the movie. I can't wait for the sequel where they introduce the Protoss, actually.
Now, before we get to talking about the film, we've got a couple of shout-outs to make. This is becoming a regular occurrence, which I'm actually quite happy with. This is awesome. And once again, this is all coming off of our YouTube channel. We got 3 comments on our The Thing episode by David Odell, Colton Becker, and JDL2112. And we also got a comment on our Jaws episode by John Cornell, who appears to have really enjoyed our discussion.
And who appears to not enjoy the constant complaints of many a person on the
shark not working.
On whether or not that shark works.
I'm going to have to go back and re-listen to the episode because I don't remember if we harp on it or how many times we might reference it or if we skimmed over it.
I don't think that we do, and I think that the movie is actually stronger not having the shark every other scene anyway, so success.
So anyways, thanks again everybody for checking the show out on YouTube and leaving a comment. We really appreciate that, and
we look forward to future ones.
And just a reminder for everybody else that any comments that you make on our Facebook page, our Twitter account, Instagram, YouTube, wherever, we will give you a shout out on the show. Our word is our bond.
Let us stroke those egos.
Now, as for Starship Troopers, Dustin, did you read the book Starship Troopers? Is that something that's in your past?
I did not. I remember seeing the book at my aunt's place, just in the shelf, when I was about 10, 12 years younger, and looked at it and considered it, but by then I had not been reading very much, and I was in college and blah 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 excuses. Never quite got around to it. Something I might have to do in the future, though.
Starship Troopers is probably, I think it might be the only Heinlein novel that I've read. I picked it up because of this film. Can't remember if I picked it up before or after. I did see Starship Troopers back in 97 in the theater, which is when I would have picked up the book as well. I remember really enjoying the book. It is fairly different from the film. Different enough that it's not one of those experiences where you read the book and you see the movie and you're like, it's like I'm experiencing it all over again. So I would recommend it. It's definitely worth checking out.
Whereas I haven't read the book, but I've seen the film about 5-6 times now, and I would recommend seeing the film. That's how you segue when you suck at segues.
And speaking of the film, would you like to know more? Let's roll the credits on this and start our conversation because
that's how we do.
I don't think our banter is strong here this week. I think we're maybe a little burnt out on the Halloween stuff.
Never.
So, credits on Starship Troopers. It was directed by Paul Verhoeven. It was produced by John Davison and Alan Marshall. Screenplay was by Ed Neumeier. It was based on Starship Troopers by Robert Heinlein. It starred Casper Van Dien, Dina Meyer, Denise Richards, Jake Busey, Neil Patrick Harris, Patrick Muldoon, and Michael Ironside. Also Clancy Brown. Can't forget Clancy Brown. Music was by Basil Polidorus. Cinematography was by Joost Vacano. It was edited by Mark Goldblatt and Carolyn Ross. It was distributed by TriStar Pictures and Buena Vista International. Released on November 7th, 1997. And the film was nominated for several awards, and in 2012, Slant Magazine ranked the film number 20 on its list of the 100 best films of the 1990s.
And it ranks 894th on the Critics' Poll for the Sight and Sound poll, and 546th for the Director's Poll.
So, with the credits out of the way, Dustin, what did you think of Starship Troopers?
As I said before, I've seen the movie probably about 5 or 6 times. Every time I enjoy it. It is a perennial favorite for sure. Something that actually really surprises me on this rewatch, because this is the first time I've seen it again since we started doing the show, and I've started getting a little more critical about a lot of things, noticing a lot of stuff that I wouldn't before. There's a lot of cheeseball stuff in this movie that somehow still works along with everything else. There's a lot of different... The tone shifts all over the place, and a lot of the acting can be pretty cheesy, some pretty cheesy lines, but it almost works with just sort of the overdone aspects of the satire that this movie is.
Well, both Ed Neumeier and Paul Verhoeven have stated in interviews and commentaries that this movie sort of has this inner layer of serious social commentary, but its exterior is very plastic and hyperbolic. And that is by design, and that's part of sort of the charm of the movie. It's so ridiculous and enjoyable, but you can't watch the movie and not see... Well, I suppose some people probably could, but they're probably cloth-eared nincompoops. But you can't watch this movie and not see that kind of social commentary underneath.
And that social commentary is somehow so much more relevant these days. The argument between the two pundits, where they were going on about whether or not a bug could be intelligent, and the one keeps cutting off the other, just, no, it is insulting to me, the mere fact that a bug could possibly think. The whole, humans are first, the only things that are intelligent in the entire universe. You see the whole America first thing going on there. You see a lot of self-entitlement. You see a lot of stuff that is so relevant now.
It is super interesting looking at, the release of the book, which was 1954 or 1959, somewhere in there. Just the whole fascist overtones of the book, people at the time sort of being a little startled by it, but also kind of seeing, a few parallels and what ifs with the Cold War and everything. And then you flash forward to all these other periods where people have sort of picked this up and talked about it, to where the movie was being made. And like, this movie was made 20 years ago. And when you watch the bonus features or get into the interviews and stuff that anybody was kind of doing at the time, they're all going, this has never been more relevant. And we're sitting here and we're watching those guys. And for me, honestly, the most horrifying thing in the movie this watch through was watching the pundits, and the one guy was basically like, I don't like your point, so I'm going to refute it. I disagree with you, so...
I'm going to shout over you and not let you say what you gotta say.
So facts don't exist because I don't like them. And I think
even the look on his face is just, you wanted to punch him so hard, so bad.
I think that's part of the brilliance of the movie, is that, there's kind of so much interlaced throughout it. I guess it's kind of sad that the stuff that people, pick out of it and go, oh, that's relevant. Like, they're all not good things with society. And we can all recognize them at any, point in history and be, well, this really reminds me of this, or this reminds me of that.
Which is, of course, the point of satire in the first place.
But yeah, it's also the beauty and the strength of this movie. And I think a lot of it also had to do with the fact that, Neumeier also wrote RoboCop. He's very much a stick-it-to-the-man, looking at the crass corporate culture. He's no friend of sort of the establishment. He's a very broad satirist. And then you get Paul Verhoeven, who isn't from around here, and the cinematographer Joost Vacano, German-born. I believe Verhoeven's Dutch, right?
Sounds like it.
I'm pretty sure he's Dutch. Vacano is German. So you have these people who, you have an anti-establishment writer, you have a Dutch director, you have a German cinematographer, and guys who were around, who were children during World War II. Not Neumeier. Neumeier is probably in his 30s or something
who have also, of course, gone through the Cold War.
Yeah, and they've seen this stuff. They've seen, they lived when this culture was alive. So I think they were able to imbue it with, as far as they were pushing that hyperbole, both with the violence I mean, at the time, this was considered a very crass film because Verhoeven was the kind of guy who did bloody. He did bloody and he did nudity like there was, nothing to be ashamed of.
And honestly, despite...
I was doing air quotes there just in case.
I could hear it in your voice, actually. But even though there was a lot of blood, and even though there was a decent amount of nudity, it was not gratuitous.
No, at the time... people felt it was
definitely different. But
this is stuff we see on Game of Thrones now. Like... beheadings and disembowelments and...
But it's never...
Shit, we see that on YouTube now.
But it's never the focus. The nudity and the violence it's never the focus in the movie. It's stuff that's happening. Probably the most jarring times when it's the most focused on is the devastation in Buenos Aires when they have like the dog that was crushed and then they move over to a guy.
Sorry, I shouldn't laugh at that. It was just because the guy's comment and the way that they spotlighted it on that FedNet.
Exactly. It's all terrible. Like, this many people dead, and we're looking for survivors, and it's terrible, and we're looking for hope in all of it. And they pan over to the one guy who delivers his line in the cheesiest possible way, and it goes back to one of the commercials that keeps happening throughout the whole thing. Would you like to know more? And any time that they move to something that's that serious, usually they take it back a step. Or they'll go the complete other direction and have something that's a ridiculous parody, like, everyone's doing their part. And you've got a bunch of school kids just stomping on bugs and the teacher in the background who apparently has the fetish of kids stomping on bugs based on the look on her face.
They said they were influenced by propaganda posters. They said that they were influenced by World War II. They said that they were...
the SS suits that the High Command wear, for sure.
Neumeier said he wanted to make one of those sort of classic war movies, the coming-of-age movies, where it's all very rah-rah, and you go off to war, and you become a man, and that whole jingoistic thing is there.
At the beginning of the movie, it's all very 50s, go to the sock hop sort of everybody. You have Rico, the star quarterback, and his girlfriend that he goes to join the Marines to be around, and it's all very sort of cliched and classic. You move off and they start experiencing war, and they move from being all rah-rah to being they go from having this sort of celebratory, we're going to be heroes, to now we got to get revenge because they killed our guys, which is very classic.
But there's also a weird... I mean, you mentioned the tonal back and forth with the movie, and you'll have a very, real moment, or as real as this movie gets, and then they'll jump right into, let's go kill them all, and it's not necessarily... It doesn't necessarily feel driven by any buildup of emotion that we're kind of used to in traditional cinematic storytelling. The switch is literally a switch being flicked. People's deaths... People who are respected or loved by these characters, they'll die, and they'll have this brief moment of, oh well, that was terrible. But then they're instantly back into this zone where it's all, propaganda and everything that...
Everyone's going to have PTSD up the wazoo at the end of this.
But that's just it. I don't think they will, because I don't think...
Because you think they're so into it?
I don't think they're wired to be affected by it in that way, yeah.
Well, people are dying during basic training. You're getting your hands stabbed, your arms broken. You're getting messed up.
Life is kind of cheap.
Oh, that life is cheap as hell in this movie.
I also found it interesting. The characters, it's really hard to lock on to any... Actually, no, let me rephrase that. I loved Dean Neumeier as Dizzy. The only thing that I can really say that I didn't like about Dizzy's character is the last line that she has where she says, I'm dying happy because at least I got to have you. That rang false with me in the past, but this time I realized these are kids. They just came out of high school. They went straight into service.
They don't know shit about nothing.
They don't know shit about the world, about relationships. All they have is their hormones and what they've been programmed to do by the society that they live in. Really, there's only two things that Dizzy wanted. Dizzy wanted to be a citizen through service, and Dizzy wanted Rico. And so, yeah, that's kind of the fulfillment of her goals there.
Though maybe in the last 2 seconds where her last words became, oh my God, don't let me go. You seem to be laughing at a lot of death here today. You're a bit of a psycho, I think, here.
But despite my affection for Dizzy's character, I found every other character, at one point or another, I liked them and I hated them. And you take a character like Rico, who, he's kind of a meathead. He's kind of the dumb jock. He gets bad math grades. But then you see him kind of stepping up and sort of coming into his own. But then you realize that he's been given this responsibility, but all he's doing is he's
running off and doing his own thing half the time.
But he's aping the authority figures in his life, the things that he's been told in basic training, the things that he's been told in his class.
He quotes his lieutenant over and over again. After he dies, almost everything he says to everyone is directly quoting a superior. It's just the next generation.
There is this... He's kind of an empty vessel, and he's been filled. You know, he obviously has something in him. He has some spark to, go forward and do these things. But I mean, he joins for a girl, and when that doesn't work out,
he quits.
He quits, yeah. And then the only reason he's brought back in is because his parents and everybody died in the Buenos Aires being wiped out by the asteroid, and
they let him back in because... why the hell not? What are you going to do with him otherwise?
There's a line that Ratchek makes early on in the film when Rico asks him, what do you think I should do? And he says, you really need to make that choice for yourself because it's the only freedom that we really have, to make choices for ourselves. And I don't feel like Rico makes a lot of choices for himself. I feel like Dizzy more so did. I think Carmen, probably out of any other character in the film, completely embraces that. And I also find it interesting that I loathe her character. I respect her, but I loathe her.
Her character is one of the most honest ones. She didn't even want to say I love you to Rico. He forced her to say it. So he really set himself up for heartache there.
And then whatever, again, with the Rico aping, in the same way that Carmen treated Rico, and Rico was the lovelorn puppy, Rico does the exact same thing to Dizzy, who's the lovelorn puppy for him. She says, I love you, and even though he's kind of embracing, Dizzy's affections for him, he still doesn't completely... It's kind of selfish and vacuous and annoying.
It's almost just a rebound.
Even though there is a weird charm to the whole thing because it's still part of this whole rah-rah kind of storytelling.
But pretty much the entire movie for most of these people is just pure adrenaline from one thing to another. And they're just grabbing onto whatever they can at the time. Whatever celebration they can. When Ratchek brings in the beer and the games and whatnot. Speaking of which, I love Busey's friggin' staring at them as they're dancing, not breaking eye contact. That is glorious.
There's something about being stared at by a Busey. This is actually, I kind of like shit on the characters a little bit there, but this is probably a good place to point out that the performances by everybody in this film are still actually pretty strong. And the characterizations, I mean, they're playing these characters to the hilt, like everything else in this movie. Nobody is holding anything back.
Any lines that feel awkward are ones that are usually mimicked. When he's doing the speech to the troops the first time he's given command of them, you can feel that he doesn't really believe it himself. He's just sort of testing the words, seeing how they feel, but at the end when he's shouting at them, do you want to live forever? At that point, he's finally bought into it. There's no more Rico left. There's just Lieutenant Rico, whatever the heck rank he's hit.
I think he's a lieutenant
yesterday.
At that point.
He gets busted up and busted down through ranks just all day, every day.
And I do think, like I said, I respected Carmen's character because she was a character who was completely true to her ideals and her ambitions.
And was honest to Rico about it the whole time.
Even though I think she's a horrible person and I hated that character. But, I think part of that is the way Denise Richards played it and how it was written. So, like that performance, I think, rang true. And it was kind of the same with Rico. Like, you got the feeling that there was this kind of hero of the Federation sort of storyline for him, but I think Casper Van Dien, he pulled off kind of that sensitivity, but also, like you said, those early times where he was saying the words that he learned from somewhere else, like, I only have one expectation, everybody fights, nobody quits. He's saying it because he thinks that's what you're supposed to say. It's not coming from somewhere kind of within him. It's coming from an external kind of source.
Which is exactly what you could say about his desire to join the military at the beginning, as he tries to convince his parents very poorly, until at the end he's just like, well, it's my choice. You can't stop me. You're not my mom. Well, actually, you are my mom, but shut up.
And like the performances sort of matching the tone of the writing and being true to that, I feel that the spectacle of the film is true to the performances and the writing. And I think because of that, because they full on embrace this, like there was no pulling back. They decided what they wanted to do and they went for it. It was balls to the wall. And this movie is a spectacle, and it is very fun to watch.
And the special effects actually live up very well. There's a lot of stuff that, it's not super great. There's some green screen, you can tell, and anything with computer screens always is bad from that era. But anything with the bugs is fantastic. Like, they use such a great mix of CGI and...
The work by Phil Tippett and Kevin Yeager on this movie was pretty spectacular. I love when they're tearing the guts out of that bug in the dissection scene, and just the way things are wiggling and all this slime, and it's very tactile, and it was a really great blend of practical and visual effects. And they knew how to light it, and they knew how to play to the strengths of the effects, and they knew how to kind of keep away from the weaknesses of the effects, which a lot of movies sort of at that time didn't really have, because they were just, let's push the envelope,
or they might focus on something too long when really they shouldn't.
Or let's try this new thing, and, maybe you shouldn't have that digital creature under such great lighting or something like that. And
anything that was under great lighting here was generally a practical effect, which is the best way to do it.
And just to kind of bring it back a little bit to the book, which I mentioned earlier in the show, there were a lot of things in the book, like the Cap Troopers, like the mobile infantry actually having mech suits, doing the whole, on the bounce, things that I think they said that at the time, and bear in mind, this is $1997, like $100 million movie in 1997 was insane. You were looking at probably 40 to 80 million for like a big movie. They budgeted it out with all of the ideas that they wanted to incorporate from the book, and I think it was like $300 million. So they were like, this is not going to work. But despite having to like jettison some things from the book and adding some things from the book and sort of treating it differently, I think it's a really great adaptation of the ideas, and it's kind of created this whole... I mean, you can still enjoy the book. The book is still its thing. But this movie has spawned a couple of games, an animated series. What is it, 4 sequels? Yeah, 4 sequels, 2 of them animated films. And they all keep to this aesthetic. It's kind of established itself. This is what is culturally accepted as what Starship Troopers is. And they can keep adding to it and enriching it, but this original Verhoeven film is kind of the foundation of what we now know as Starship Troopers. I think the fact that it made that kind of an impression, that kind of an impact, and this is such a classic sci-fi novel, and despite, like I said, having had to reject a few things, I'm kind of going on and on about this. I think that's impressive. I think that's a feat.
And speaking of the world building, I don't know necessarily what was in the book, obviously, and you said there's a lot of changes, but the society they present isn't even that terrible. Yes, there's a lot of raw military industrial complex. Everything is military, but at the same time, it's a very equal society. It's a meritocracy, which I kind of appreciate.
If you're rich, you don't have to serve. It's kind of like...
The thing is...
It's like in Roman times.
Did they mention whether or not he was considered a citizen anyway? His parents?
He was, because his parents were wealthy. He didn't have to do service to be a citizen. But he chose to do service because of the reputation and...
Certainly it says that the service is the only guaranteed way of becoming a citizen. There'd be other ways, presumably, of enriching society, and everyone always says that making money is the number one thing you can do.
But you had to be wealthy to have kids.
You had to be in the military to have kids.
You had to be... Well, that's just it. You had to be a civilian, or you had to be a citizen to have kids. You had to be a citizen to essentially go to school, because the citizens were all wealthy, or they had served in the military and had gained citizenship through that, and therefore the Federation paid for those sorts of things, or allowed those sorts of things. So you've got, like I said, it was like old kind of Roman times where you had your civilians and you had your citizens, and the citizens could vote. The citizens kind of controlled everything, and the only way that a civilian could become a citizen was to do military service. So it's just an extrapolation of that, which isn't a huge surprise, because if you look at American culture, it is sort of an outgrowth of that old sort of classical Roman culture. And also the whole concept of the movie is when democracy fails, and kind of what if sort of Adolf Hitler's Germany sort of took a foothold. Now I'm getting a little bit more political and philosophical than I need to for this show.
Well, I don't know what they do within the society itself, against itself. I don't know how poorly civilians are treated compared to citizens. They never really get into that. Yeah, you can't have kids. Yeah, you can't necessarily go to school, but it is, as I said, a meritocracy, and you can change that, which isn't the worst way to go. You still have women on equal footing with men in this movie. All races are presented, just working together, doing what they got to do. None of it seems to be an issue, which is one of the things that actually I do appreciate in sci-fi, because I'd like it to be reality.
I was thinking that as well, but I also thought that some of those people, some of those ethnically diverse people in the movie, there wasn't a ton, and I think it was probably their parents before them or their grandparents before them probably did military service.
Because they said that this has been going on, like democracy failed a couple 100 years ago. So the entire society is built and set up already at this point.
But yeah, I agree. We are also seeing it from the perspective of these are the rich, beautiful people. It was jokingly said while they were filming this movie that they were making Melrose Space, which Neumeier thought was funny because the film does sort of have that satirical bent, and they were hiring young, pretty actors.
It is a teen drama through and through. There's no kidding ourselves. Only instead of somebody moving to the next town, they just happen to get killed.
But again, the movie wholly embraces it. There's no embarrassment in this movie whatsoever, and that's why it works.
It went whole hog, and it did not fail. The world that they created is so huge. There's so much going on, so much to explore. I do look forward to seeing the next 4 movies and seeing what they do with it. I know none of them were ever as popular as this one.
They're not amazing movies, but they do in some ways expand the world and give you little tastes of other corners of this universe. The Roughnecks TV series was something that really broadened the scope of it. Just sort of taking the pacing back and making it more of like a bit of a slog. Like every campaign was 5 or 6 episodes or something. And
I really wonder, like you said, it was tailored for kids. I can't see how that would even work with this movie, having just seen it.
Well, you know what? We're doing Starship Troopers this week. We're doing Starship Troopers 2 and 3 next week. We're doing Starship Troopers Invasion and Traitor of Mars in the 3rd week of November. We technically have an open week at the end of November. If you want to do one of the Roughnecks campaigns, we can throw that in there. Just saying.
We will see. I'll probably check out the first episode after this recording just to see what is up with that.
But I'm also surprised. This is such a rich, just that opening scene when they're getting their grades and they do the pan down from the buildings. And it's a moment, for me anyways, where I thought, there's so much going on. And you listen to, the lecture that they get in the school that Michael Ironside gives them. And there's this history there. Why has this not been like a TV series? Why has no one picked this up and ran with it? Why is it... There must be some kind of rights issues or something that have locked it into some crazy, film, not television kind of thing, the way Star Trek was kind of stuck for 10 years because they went to the films. There were things that they couldn't use. But you can do an entire first season, which is everybody going through their flight training and mobile infantry basic training, and everything's building to the big thing, the big attack at Klendathu. And then your second season could be everything building up to Planet P, and then the third season could be just keep going. You can get
I'd watch
5
Melrose
seasons.
Space.
You can get 5 seasons out of this. Easy.
We've gotten 5 seasons out of less.
And when you look at what they can do on television now, the things that they can show, and I mean, for God's sake, just look what they accomplish on The Expanse every week. The technology is there to really take this somewhere, and it's a shame that nobody has, because it's a really... And it's also, this would be such a great time to have this kind of social commentary on the tube.
Come on, Netflix. You just canceled House of Cards. You gotta have something else, right? Go for this.
And now that I've proselytized for the Starship Troopers universe, which is funny because if you would have asked me, if you would have just pulled me aside at any time prior to this recording and just been like, Mike, what do you think of Starship Troopers? I'd be like, it's fun. I enjoy the movies. I've watched the show. It's a good time. But here I am, waving the flag.
Rah. It's got you too.
Join the fight.
Would you like to know more?
We will fight, and we will win. All right, so we're probably coming close to time here, so let's do our closing thoughts on Starship Troopers. Dustin, Museum piece or masterpiece?
I would say that this is a movie that, on successive watches and viewings, has not faded. It has not failed. Yeah, there's a lot of cheesy stuff going on in it, but everything works. It is a movie that will stand the test of time, and I would definitely say that this is a masterpiece.
I think just looking at when you think of the comment that I made where I said, you look at when the book came out, you look in 97, where people were talking about how relevant it was then. You look at it now, and we're going, oh my God, it's so relevant.
It will never not be relevant.
Yeah, I don't think it will never not be relevant. So that combined with how they just embrace all the hyperbole, they turn it up to 11, they look like they're having fun, and there's layers to it, and there's stuff going on, and the effects hold up, and the score is bombastic and crazy, and I'm going to go masterpiece as well. This is just... So there you go. I was a little surprised. I wasn't sure how I was going to come out at the end of that, whether I was going to go museum piece or masterpiece, but this was one of those cases we're talking about it, being able to...
Sealed the deal.
Yeah. Did you go into it knowing?
I went into it knowing.
All right.
I went into watching it basically knowing.
You were watching it as proof of concept.
I was watching it to see if I was mistaken. I've been mistaken before, I'll be mistaken again. But no, I was not wrong in my initial assessment. When
we came up with the idea to do Starship Troopers as like an entire month, there was a part of me that thought, this is ridiculous. This is not a franchise that deserves 4 weeks of commentary, but...
It was your idea!
I know it was my idea! I mean, it kind of started as just like, wow, it's the anniversary and there's these sequels and we can have fun with it. But the closer we got to it and then actually sitting down and watching the movie, I was getting excited. I'm really excited, even though I know that the sequels...
Even if it might be a ridiculous idea, you're going to turn it up to 11, have fun with it, do what they do in the first movie and just go hard. And it's going to work out great.
I couldn't have said it better myself. In fact, I did say it like 3 minutes ago in my summation.
Yes, but you're going to edit that part out and put in my part so that I look like the genius. You're welcome, and thank you.
Federal scientists struggle to explain the intelligent military actions of the arachnids.
When a colony reaches a certain size, 300 generations or something, it gets smarter.
Insects with intelligence? Have you ever met one? I can't believe I am hearing this nonsense.
You just
this
wait
is the most
a
ridiculous
moment.
conversation I have ever had.
So that brings this episode to a close. If you want to comment on our Starship Troopers commentary or just give us a shout, you can find us on all the social medias. We're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter. Like, follow, share, subscribe. Let your friends know we're out there. If you like an episode, share it on your social media. Spread the word. Grow this show. If you get the show off of iTunes while you're there downloading or streaming, give us a rating. Give us a review. It couldn't hurt, and it doesn't take a lot of time. We're available at iHeartRadio and Stitcher. We have a blog, fycshow.wordpress.com. And we have a Patreon campaign ongoing. If you want to support the show, check it out. So thanks again for joining us. Be sure to check back in next week when we'll be talking about Starship Troopers Hero of the Federation and Starship Troopers Marauder. 2 for 1, double feature, folks. And with that...
I can't come up with any quips right now.
And with
My apologies to people who think that I'm clever and entertaining.
And with
Can I interrupt you a third time? Yes! Success!
And with that, I've been your host, Mike.
And I've been Dustin.
And remember...
Come on, you ape! You want to live forever?
Would you like to know more?